They believed setting fire to my family's 8-decade-old cabin resort would shatter my spirit. But that was before I stepped into an emergency HOA meeting, holding a manila folder that drained all the color from their president's face. Imagine the scene. 2:30 in the morning, with flames leaping 30 feet into the air. The tools my grandfather once used were melting inside a shed that held the memories of 3 generations. The sharp odor of burning propane blended with my wife's sobs as she witnessed our means of living being reduced to cinders at sunrise. Our HOA president, Delilah Thornfield, appeared with her coffee, an actual smile on her face as she surveyed the devastation. Move forward 6 months. It's the same woman in a packed community center with television cameras recording the event. I was the one striding down the central aisle, carrying a manila folder filled with evidence valued at $847,000. The moment I opened it and began reciting the bank records aloud, her million-dollar smile fractured like brittle paint. You see, they had made a single critical error. They became so intoxicated by their own authority, so assured in their little corruption scheme, that they overlooked one thing. I'm not the type to simply get angry. I become systematic. What did that folder hold? It was a financial paper trail so incriminating it landed 3 individuals in prison and initiated the most significant HOA corruption investigation in the history of the state. Before we get into the details, leave a comment. What course of action would you take if your HOA literally incinerated your livelihood? Also, tell me where you are watching from. I'm curious to see just how widespread this HOA nightmare epidemic has become. My name is Rex Hartwell, and just 3 months ago, the most pressing issue in my life was deciding whether to replace the dock planks this spring or postpone it until autumn. It's remarkable how quickly things can descend into chaos when you're simply trying to live your life. Pine Haven Cabin Resort occupies 40 acres of premium lakefront land in the North Carolina mountains. In 1943, my grandfather constructed the first cabin using only a handsaw, sheer willpower, and the kind of unyielding pride that is practically a genetic trait in our family. 12 rustic cabins now line the shore, each one aged to that ideal silver-gray hue that signifies an authentic mountain getaway for city dwellers seeking a slice of the simple life. My wife, Sarah, manages the office with the precision of a Swiss timepiece and the charm of freshly baked cookies. Our 16-year-old twin sons, Jake and Luke, pass their summers clearing trails and showing urban kids how to bait a hook without injuring themselves. We aren't getting wealthy. Hell, some years we scarcely break even. But we are serving 3 generations of families who've been vacationing here since their own grandparents were young. Then 2019 arrived, and along with it Thornfield Estates. The developer touted luxury mountain living that would honor the natural setting. What we actually got was a gated enclave of 8,000 square-foot McMansions, each one more ostentatious than the one before. To make matters worse, the developer's attorneys established a compulsory HOA that, somehow, and I still don't understand how it was lawful, encompassed both the new subdivision and our pre-existing resort. This is American property law, where your rights can vanish more quickly than the morning fog. The HOA fees struck us with the force of a sledgehammer, while residents were charged $400 a month. We, as a commercial entity, were billed $2,800. The stated goal was to preserve the rustic character while ensuring property values for all stakeholders. These were pleasant-sounding words that, as I would soon learn, were utterly meaningless. This brings us to Delilah Thornfield, the HOA president and the living personification of everything flawed about petty tyranny. At 58 years old, she was a corporate lawyer from Phoenix, married to Morton, a retired banking executive who looked as though he could drain the happiness from a child's birthday celebration. She drove a white Tesla, was draped in designer labels, and possessed a smile that could freeze antifreeze. Their residence was a monument of glass and steel dedicated to extravagance, featuring a lawn so flawlessly groomed it resembled artificial turf. Not a single tree remained on their lot. They had raised everything to secure clear mountain vistas, because apparently, nothing says mountain living like leveling the actual mountains. The first warning shot arrived in the spring of 2023. It was a certified letter on HOA letterhead, delivered with all the friendliness of a tax audit, aesthetic compliance violation. It declared, followed by 3 pages of stipulations that sent my blood pressure soaring. A fresh coat of stain on all 12 cabins would cost $15,000. New, community-appropriate signage was priced at $8,000. Landscaping upgrades to align with neighborhood standards would be $12,000. The total came to a staggering $35,000 that we simply did not have. With a 60-day compliance window that was as good as 60 minutes, I drove to Delilah's fortress of a home to negotiate a more sensible time frame. As I pressed her doorbell, the scent of new mulch from her meticulously kept flower beds mingled with the chemical sharpness of lawn pesticides. When she opened the door, her Chanel perfume assailed me like a wave of costly aggression. "Mrs. Thornfield, I need to talk about the compliance notice. We're ready to make upgrades, but will require more time to Mr. Hartwell." Her voice was cold enough to flash freeze a lake. "This is not a charitable organization. Your property impacts our property values. Compliance is not open for discussion." The gravel crunched beneath my boots on the walk back to my truck, a grim realization settling in. This woman had no interest in finding a reasonable solution. She demanded capitulation, and that is a quality the Hartwell family has never been skilled at offering. By August, I had managed to pull together enough funds to stain 4 of the 12 cabins. The aroma of fresh cedar stain mixed with the scent of lake water ought to have been gratifying. Instead, it was like putting money into a faulty slot machine. I contacted the HOA office, optimistic that my display of good faith would grant me an extension for the other 8. Jenny, the secretary at the management company, sounded truly sympathetic. "I will forward your request to the board, Mr. Hartwell. I'm certain they will be understanding about an extension." Poor Jenny. She was oblivious to the fact that she was employed by sociopaths. 3 days later, another certified letter came, landing like a legal grenade. Not only was my extension request denied, but they had also seemingly unearthed a whole new array of violations that left me reeling. The dock, which had stood since 1965, now supposedly projected 3 feet past the allowed waterline. Our gravel parking lot, used by families for decades, was now cited for lacking proper drainage permits. Even our evening campfire pit, where children roasted marshmallows beneath the stars, was somehow in breach of open flame regulations. The daily penalties began at $500 for each violation. With 4 violations active, we were losing $1,100 every single day. Sarah discovered me at the kitchen table at midnight, calculator in hand, watching our life savings vanish in real time. $40,000 a month. More than what most people earn in an entire year. It was then that I recalled a saying of my grandfather's. When someone is attempting to take your land, the first thing to check is who truly holds the title. He was a wise man. Despite never attending law school, I dedicated the following week to the courthouse basement, sifting through records that likely hadn't seen daylight since the Carter administration. The elderly clerk, a kind soul, guided me through filing systems that appeared to have been arranged by someone with a deep-seated animosity toward alphabetical order. What I uncovered, however, made me laugh aloud. Probably the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. Our resort had been established 30 years before any of the current zoning ordinances. We possessed what attorneys term legal non-conforming status, essentially a grandfather clause more robust than Superman's cape. I had heard about this concept years prior when a friend faced similar challenges with his auto repair business. The dock, the parking area, and the fire pit were all safeguarded under county law. Every fine they were imposing on us was as legally sound as monopoly money. I dispatched a certified letter to their lawyer, enclosing copies of the pertinent statutes and demanding an immediate halt to all illegitimate fines. For a full 24 hours, I genuinely believed I had prevailed. Then my phone rang. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Delilah Thornfield." Her voice was coated in a saccharine sweetness that could likely cause cavities in her dental work. "While your historical inquiry is fascinating, we have been compelled to enact new safety protocols for the protection of everyone. The new emergency rule, passed in a special meeting I was conveniently not informed of, mandated that all commercial properties maintain $2 million in liability insurance. Our existing policy provided $500,000 in coverage, the industry standard for small resorts, as advised by every agent I had ever consulted. The quotes I got for the augmented coverage made my chest constrict. An extra $18,000 annually. Surely you can appreciate," Delilah went on, her tone saturated with feigned concern, "that public safety must take precedence over sentimental attachments to antiquated business models." At that moment, hearing her casually write off 80 years of family legacy as a sentimental attachment, I felt a profound shift within me. This wasn't about aesthetics or safety, it was about money. Specifically, about compelling us to spend so much that we would be left with no option but to sell to whichever party was waiting to pounce. But they had chosen the wrong family to engage in a game of financial brinkmanship. I connected with our long-standing guests via Facebook, launching a Save Pinehaven group that swelled to 800 members in just 2 weeks. Families who had been vacationing with us for generations began posting stories, pictures, and memories that brought tears to my eyes. The local newspaper ran the story under a headline that made me smile. Family business under siege by HOA overreach. The outpouring of community support was like a warm ray of sunshine after months of stormy weather. Yet, even as people rallied to our cause, I could almost hear the click of Delilah's stilettos on her marble floors as she schemed her next assault. And believe me, she was far from finished. The victory regarding the insurance lasted for precisely 12 days before Delilah retaliated with the grace of a sledgehammer to the cranium. I had discovered a workaround through our agent, an umbrella policy that increased our liability coverage to the required $2 million for $4,800 a year, not the initial $18,000. Walking into the September board meeting with the certificate and seeing Delilah's meticulously maintained composure falter for an instant felt like David landing his initial stone on Goliath's brow. "Well," she remarked, her voice stretched so taut it could have snapped a guitar string. "It's gratifying to see adherence to our safety mandates." But her eyes promised retribution. Labor Day weekend attracted families from 3 different states for our yearly barbecue and talent show, a custom that began when my grandfather needed a way to amuse children during a rainy week in 1952. The air, filled with the aroma of hickory smoke and the sound of children's laughter, should have been perfect. Instead, I observed an unfamiliar man with a clipboard roaming our property like a health inspector at a service station's hot dog stand. "Property assessment," he stated when I confronted him, without looking up from his clipboard. "Board-sanctioned inspection for compliance verification." I would have wagered my last cent that this man had never even glanced at a building code manual, but he was as persistent as cancer. A total of 47 violations materialized over the course of 3 days. A wobbly handrail on cabin 7. A minor electrical problem in the office that our own electrician confirmed was actually up to code. And fire extinguishers that were 2 months overdue for inspection. Even the rope swing that children had enjoyed for decades was suddenly deemed a liability risk, demanding its immediate dismantling. What truly infuriated me was seeing him disrupt families' vacations. Mrs. Patterson, who had been bringing her grandchildren here for 15 years, was forced to move her car 3 times because it was allegedly obstructing emergency access routes that had never existed before that weekend. "This is harassment," I said to the inspector after he ticketed us for insufficient signage on a bathroom that was clearly labeled and had been in the same location since the Carter administration. He merely shrugged. "I don't create the rules, pal, I just enforce them. But there's a consequence to pushing a man too far. Eventually, he ceases to retreat and begins to hunt." I contacted my paralegal friend, Jenny Blackwood, a woman who could discover loopholes in the 10 Commandments given enough coffee and a compelling reason. For $500, she consented to analyze our HOA's governing documents with the meticulousness of a forensic pathologist. What she uncovered over the next week helped me understand why Delilah was so self-assured in her little power plays. The original covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS. The constitution of any HOA stipulated that a majority vote of all property owners was necessary for any rule amendments affecting commercial properties. However, the emergency insurance rule had been approved with only 12 of the 47 residents in attendance, all of whom were from Thornfield Estates. "They can't simply force this through with a biased meeting," Jenny clarified, her finger highlighting the relevant section. "This is elementary corporate governance. You have grounds to contest every rule they have enacted in the past year." I had become familiar with these voting protocols years earlier when my brother contended with his condo association's attempt to prohibit his motorcycle. It appeared that every property owner in America eventually receives an education in HOA law, typically the difficult way. In the meantime, the local television station got wind of our situation. The reporter, a sharp woman named Rita Gonzalez, interviewed 3 generations of the Morrison family, who had been visiting since the 1960s. "This place is a time capsule," old Frank Morrison stated to the camera, his weathered hands gesturing towards the lake. "My children learned to swim in that water. My grandchildren caught their first fish from that dock. Now, some lawyer from Phoenix wants to replace it with condos because it doesn't complement her marble countertops. When Delilah was approached for a statement, she refused. An on-camera interview, her husband, Morton, offered a curt no comment that made him seem guilty of something. Though I was not yet sure what, social media erupted. Save Pinehaven began trending in the local area, accompanied by photos of family memories from over the decades. The support was both overwhelming and humbling, however. I was learning that each victory had its price when I presented the board with our legal challenge to their voting practices, demanding a formal recount on the insurance rule. Delilah's reaction was swift and brutal. Property inspections doubled. Code enforcement officials began appearing weekly. Even our propane provider received a mysterious call questioning our safety record and implying they should reconsider our contract. Sarah found me in the office one night, staring at a stack of violation notices that resembled a small telephone directory. "Maybe we should think about selling," she suggested quietly. The developer called again. "His offer is up to $800,000. I glanced at the framed picture on my desk. My grandfather shaking hands with our first guest in 1943, both of them beaming as if they had just discovered gold. Which, in a sense, they had. "No," I replied. "They want us out? They'll have to do much better than this." October 15th, 2:30 a.m. I will carry that timestamp with me for the remainder of my life, seared into my memory just like the flames that jolted me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Sarah shook me awake, her voice piercing through my dreams like a fire alarm. "Rex, get up, something is on fire." The orange luminescence through our bedroom window conveyed everything before my feet even touched the floor. Our maintenance shed. 80 years of tools, memories, and irreplaceable family equipment was being consumed by fire like a Viking's funeral pyre. The pungent odor of burning propane mingled with melting plastic and another smell I couldn't place, but it made my stomach tighten. I dialed 911 while hastily pulling on boots and jeans. But by the time the volunteer fire department got there, the shed was a complete loss. 3 distinct burn patterns. The fire chief observed grimly, which indicated one thing. Arson. What transpired next still makes my blood boil at 6:45 a.m., just over 4 hours after the fire started. I got to the smoldering remains to meet with the insurance investigator, and there, standing next to the smoking debris with a steaming coffee cup and dressed in designer jogging attire, was Delilah Thornfield. "Mourning. Constitutional," she remarked with a smile that would be more at home in a shark documentary. A terrible tragedy, although I must admit that old shed was quite an eyesore. Perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. An opportunity for more aesthetically pleasing storage solutions. Morton showed up 5 minutes later with a camera, asserting that he was documenting the destruction for the HOA's insurance records when the fire chief questioned their presence before the property owner had even been officially informed. Morton's face turned a shade of red brighter than a sunburned tourist's. The insurance investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Carol who had evidently encountered every type of fraud imaginable, arched an eyebrow at their opportune arrival. Curious timing for a morning jog, given that this isn't your usual path. I spent the subsequent week acting as a detective, and what I uncovered made my grandfather's tales of combating claim jumpers in the Old West seem rather tame. Security camera footage from the adjacent marina captured a figure in dark attire scaling our fence at 2:15 a.m. The person's build was strikingly similar to Morton's, though the face was hidden by a hood. Then, an anonymous envelope materialized on my office desk. It had no postmark and no return address, just photographs of Morton at Brennan's Hardware the day before the fire, buying 3 5-gallon gas cans. The receipt was still attached, his credit card signature as clear as day. The enclosed note was short. "Some of us are appalled by what they are doing, a neighbor." I came to realize we had allies within Thornfield Estates, people who had been observing this corruption and were finally fed up enough to take action. Sometimes, the most effective weapon against bullies is the conscience of their own neighbors. However, proving arson and securing an insurance payout were 2 separate struggles. Our policy was set to cover the $25,000 to replace the shed, but only after we obtained an HOA compliance certificate, and guess who declined to sign it? Given the suspicious nature of the fire, Delilah declared at the following board meeting, "We have reservations about the property management practices that might have led to this unfortunate event." She was effectively holding our insurance funds hostage until we fulfilled every single compliance requirement. We were unable to rebuild without the insurance money, unable to get the insurance money without compliance, and unable to pay for compliance without the insurance money. It was a flawless financial snare, and she was well aware of it. The emergency board meeting she convened 2 days later was like witnessing a kangaroo court in action. A new rule was introduced. All commercial properties had to install. $800,000 would settle our debts and give us a fresh start. I gazed at my grandfather's picture on the refrigerator, showing him teaching my father to fish from the very dock they were now trying to demolish. 3 generations of Hartwells had battled to keep this place going. We had endured weather, economic slumps, shifting vacation habits, and family crises. We had overcome it all, but we had never encountered an adversary so calculating, so determined to annihilate everything we had constructed just to inflate their property values. No, I said, taken aback by my own calm demeanor. They want a war, they will get one, but I am finished playing defense. The following morning, I made 2 phone calls that would alter the course of everything. The first was to Jenny, requesting that she demand every financial document the HOA had produced over the past 4 years. The second was to the county sheriff, to report a suspected case of arson, complete with photographic proof if Delilah wanted to play hardball. She was about to find out that some of us had been in the game for much longer than she had. 3 days later, fortified by North Carolina's public records law and Jenny's legal acumen, I entered the management company's office as if I held a search warrant. The receptionist's anxious smile revealed everything about how rare such requests were. "We'll require a few days to gather everything," she said haltingly, evidently wishing I would just leave. "State law dictates a maximum of 72 hours, Jenny stated calmly, pushing the official request form across the counter. "We will return on Friday at noon." The contents of the 4 bankers' boxes we retrieved would have made Al Capone's bookkeeper turn pale. I laid out the documents on my kitchen table, like pieces of a hellish jigsaw puzzle, and the image that took shape made my blood run cold. Over the preceding 4 years, our HOA had amassed $1 million from all property owners, the reserve fund, money designated for emergencies and significant repairs, should have held a minimum of $800,000. The actual balance was a mere $23,000. This meant that someone had caused $3 million to vanish. I had learned about reserve fund regulations during my brother's dispute with his condo board. Most states require these accounts to prevent HOAs from facing bankruptcy when a roof needs replacing or roads require repaving. But this was not mismanagement. It was systematic embezzlement. The money trail wound through a labyrinth of bloated contracts and non-existent expenses that would have impressed a mob accountant. Delilah's nephew in Phoenix operated the management company, which billed us $8,000 a month for landscaping services that any reputable contractor would have offered for $3,000. Snow removal expenses reached $15,000 per season for a job that needed 2 people but somehow involved 3 full-time crews. But it was the personal enrichment scheme that left me astounded. Delilah's home landscaping project had been covered by HOA funds. $75,000 for a design that looked like it was lifted from a country club. Morton's driveway snow removal equipment, a $35,000 plow truck, had somehow been classified as a community expense. Board members had attended HOA conferences at luxurious resorts in Hawaii and the Bahamas, charging $28,000 for educational expenses over a 2-year period. Every invoice, every receipt, and every fraudulent charge had been approved by a board that treated our community's funds like their personal bank account. Then, I discovered the bombshell hidden within their management contracts. A clause, unlike any I had seen before, granting the HOA the authority to compel property sales if an owner created ongoing financial burdens for the association. Properties unable to clear accumulated fines could be taken over and sold to recoup the costs. The enforcement mechanism was already established, merely awaiting the opportune moment. Morton was the owner of a company named Mountain Properties LLC. It took 3 guesses to figure out who was set to acquire Pine Haven Resort for a fraction of its value once they had fabricated enough financial strain to warrant a seizure. The entire timeline was laid out in black and white. Force Rex out by spring, purchase the property for $600,000 through their shell company, and then demolish everything to build luxury condos. 200 new HOA units would generate nearly $1 million in additional annual dues. I was not their first intended victim. I was just the initial domino. 3 other pre-existing properties had already been subjected to similar harassment campaigns. The auto repair shop, the antique store, and the small fishing guide service. All of them occupied prime real estate that could be redeveloped for luxury purposes. Jenny's face turned pale as we pieced it all together. Rex, this is more than just HOA misconduct. This is organized fraud, potentially even racketeering. These people could face prison time. That night, I sat in my grandfather's old armchair, gazing at the lake where 3 generations of children had learned to swim. The moonlight shimmered on the water, just as it had 80 years ago. But everything else had been altered. We were no longer fighting solely for our resort. We were fighting for the very soul of our community. For the first time in months, I smiled, not from happiness, but because I finally grasped the game they were playing. And once you understand the rules, you can devise a way to win. They had made one critical error in their otherwise perfect crime. They had become so greedy, so certain of their little corruption scheme, that they had documented everything, every fraudulent expense, every inflated contract, every step of their property acquisition conspiracy was there in those boxes, signed and dated like a written confession. Delilah thought she was playing chess with a country simpleton who would crumble under duress. She was about to discover that some of us play a much more patient game than she ever imagined. The next morning, I convened a war council. Jenny was the first to arrive, her paralegal expertise evident in the color-coded file folders she carried like ammunition. Marcus, our CPA and a guest for 20 years who had built a forensic accounting practice that had brought down 3 embezzling CFOs, followed. Rita Gonzalez, the retired investigative reporter who had covered our story, contributed decades of experience in exposing corruption. Even Sheriff Deputy Tom Bradley came on his day off, stating that some matters are more important than jurisdictional lines. We spread all the evidence across the resort's conference room table, like general strategizing for D-Day. "This is a thing of beauty," Marcus remarked, examining the financial records with the admiration of an artist looking at a masterpiece. "They've documented it all. Every fraudulent transaction, every kickback, every personal expense. It's as if they wanted to be caught." Rita was already on her laptop, referencing names and companies. "I've encountered this pattern in municipal corruption cases before. They establish a network of shell companies, inflate every contract, and skim from various revenue sources. Their arrogance is invariably their undoing." But Jenny had pinpointed our true weapon. "The annual budget meeting, December 31st, she explained, gesturing to the HOA bylaws. "Every property owner is entitled to vote on the upcoming year's budget and board positions. There are 47 homes. In Thornfield, plus 12 other properties, including yours, you need 30 votes to gain control of everything. Fire the management company, recall the board, and elect honest leadership." I had learned this lesson years ago while watching my uncle battle his neighborhood association. Most people don't attend these meetings, which is precisely how criminals gain power, but when property owners actually participate and vote, the dynamics shift dramatically. Marcus crunched the numbers while Rita leveraged her media connections. Each property owner has been overcharged an average of $8,000 over 4 years due to these inflated contracts. When people learn they can receive refunds and lower dues, you'll secure all the votes you need. The plan took shape. Expose the corruption publicly before the meeting, encourage every property owner to be present, and then seize control through a legitimate democratic process. It was clean, legal, and would be utterly devastating to their scheme. Rita's phone buzzed with a text message that made her smile. Channel 9's investigative unit wants to produce a feature story. They're titling it, HOA Corruption, a statewide epidemic. Your case will be the main focus, airing the week before your budget meeting. We spent the afternoon rehearsing my interview, concentrating on specific figures and clear timelines, no emotion, just the facts. Rita had covered enough corruption scandals to know that while righteous indignation is compelling, cold, hard facts dismantle defenses. Meanwhile, our anonymous supporters within Thornfield Estates were providing us with intelligence that would have impressed the CIA. Recordings of board meetings, private conversations, and even email screenshots that revealed the conspiracy in their own words, the most damning. Recording made my hands tremble. Morton was caught on tape saying, "Once we acquire that resort, we'll be sitting on a $2 million gold mine. These hillbillies have no concept of property values. It's practically a charitable act." "Really?" Delilah's voice followed. "The Pinehaven acquisition is merely the start. We will oust every pre-existing property and properly redevelop this entire area, mountain living for people who truly deserve it." That last phrase struck me like a physical blow. people who truly deserve it. As if my grandfather, who had fought in World War II and built this place with his own hands, somehow deserved less than a lawyer from Phoenix who had bought her way into our community. But their arrogance was becoming our strength. Tom Bradley examined our evidence with the methodical precision of someone who had constructed numerous court cases. Criminal charges for embezzlement are a sure thing. A civil recovery action will get your money back more quickly. File both at the same time. The pressure will make them collapse like lawn chairs. The community organizing effort resembled a political campaign. We held pizza nights for property owners where I presented the financial evidence in charts simple enough for a fifth grader to grasp. We created carpool lists to guarantee maximum attendance at the budget meeting and even distributed a voting guide for the new board candidates we had recruited. I had seen this strategy succeed during my neighbor's successful fight against a corrupt school board. When honest people organize and participate, the crooks lose every time. The battle over the venue was critical. Delilah wanted the meeting in their small clubhouse, which had a capacity of only 20 people. I insisted on the community center, referencing a state law that mandates adequate space for all eligible voters. When she attempted to deny our request, Jenny threatened immediate legal action. Public meetings must, in fact, be public. Jenny informed the panicking board. If you try to exclude voters, you'll be facing federal civil rights violations in addition to your other issues. Sarah found me in the office late one night, surrounded by boxes of evidence and presentation materials. You seem different, she observed, confident again. She was correct. For months, I had been on the defensive, reacting to their assaults, constantly a step behind. Now, I was the one setting the terms, the hunter, not the hunted. December 15th. I told her. Everything will change on December 15th. November brought Delilah's desperation. Rolling in like a cold front from hell, anonymous flyers began appearing in Thornfield mailboxes overnight, printed on high-quality paper that bespoke a professional smear campaign. The headlines were sickening. Resort owner under investigation for tax evasion. Photographs of our fire damage were paired with deceptive captions about negligent fire hazards that endangered families. Fabricated quotes from concerned former guests described deteriorating standards and unsafe conditions. Rita's investigative skills immediately took over. She traced the printing to Murphy's coffee shop downtown, where security footage captured Morton making copies at 11 p.m., looking around anxiously like a teenager buying condoms. Amateur hour? Rita remarked, watching the footage. These people have seen too many movies and not enough courtroom television. But the smear campaign was merely the initial salvo. The developer showed up at my door in person 3 days later, offering a handshake and a smile that must have cost him $50,000 in dental work. He had arrived in a BMW that was more expensive than most people's homes, dressed in a suit that declared, "I devour small businesses for breakfast. Rex Hartwell, I'm David Morrison with Mountain Vista Development. I have a proposal that you might find appealing." His enhanced offer was a financial sledgehammer. $950,000 in cash, with all HOA fines and legal troubles mysteriously vanishing upon the sale. The timing was too perfect, the solution too neat. I legally recorded the entire conversation. North Carolina's one-party consent law had become my closest ally. There has been an understanding with the current board, he conceded when I questioned him about the disappearing legal issues. Sometimes, these neighborhood disagreements can be settled through mutually beneficial arrangements. Thank you, I responded, my voice as steady as granite. But I am not for sale at any price. His smile cracked like cheap paint. That's unfortunate. I hope you reconsider before things become more difficult. Things did become more difficult within a week. Our internet service was cut when excavation equipment accidentally severed the fiber optic line. Twice, our phone lines were cut so frequently that Verizon began to joke about installing armored cables. The health inspector appeared, prompted by anonymous complaints that proved to be entirely baseless. He found nothing but conceded that someone had been extremely persistent about having us shut down. The trail cameras I had installed after the arson captured Morton's pickup truck near our property at 2 a.m., headlights off, moving along the fence line like a coyote stalking a chicken coop. Then came the legal intimidation, which revealed just how frightened they had become. Their attorneys sent a cease and desist letter via certified mail, demanding that I halt my campaign of harassment against respected community leaders. They threatened a $100,000 defamation lawsuit if I persisted in spreading libelous accusations and Stalking board members, Jenny's reply was a masterpiece. A preview of our evidence portfolio that silenced their lawyers so completely you could almost hear his billable hours ticking away. We never heard from him again. The social media war intensified beyond anything I had foreseen. Fake Facebook profiles materialized overnight, attacking everything from my military service to Sarah's background, branding her an outsider gold digger. Someone posted photos of our boys with captions that questioned my parenting abilities. When the attacks were directed at my family, something primal and dangerous stirred within me. You can threaten my business, my property, and even my reputation. But when you target my wife and children, you have crossed a line from which there is no return. Our Save Pinehaven supporters retaliated fiercely, exposing the fake profiles and tracing IP addresses back to Thornfield Estates. The online mob turned on its instigators faster than a rabid dog. But the financial pressure campaign almost broke us. The HOA suddenly demanded immediate payment of all outstanding fines, totaling $127,000. Lien preparation notices were sent to our bank, jeopardizing our credit line. Our insurance company received anonymous tips about safety violations that necessitated 2 separate inspections to disprove. Even our propane supplier inexplicably canceled our contract, citing reliability concerns. I realized this was a coordinated assault aimed at forcing an operational shutdown before the budget meeting. They were attempting to bleed us dry with 1,000 cuts, hoping we would succumb before we could expose them. The community's counterresponse took everyone, including me, by surprise. Rita's 3-part newspaper series was launched like a journalistic carpet bombing. HOA corruption. The Pinehaven War. Part 1 revealed the financial mismanagement. Part 2 detailed the harassment campaign. Part 3 linked everything to the arson. Investigation and the pending criminal referral. Social media exploded. The story was shared 2,000 times locally and was then picked up by regional media outlets. Suddenly, our small David versus Goliath struggle was becoming a symbol of HOA abuse nationwide. The anonymous network of allies within Thornfield Estates was feeding us intelligence that depicted an organization imploding. Board members were pressuring residents to vote against us, threatening them with their own violation campaigns if they showed support. Some neighbors were being told that supporting the resort would decimate their property values, but people were growing weary of the threats. 3 more residents contacted us in secret, offering to testify about the intimidation tactics. Then came Thanksgiving week, and the attack that nearly broke my resolve. Our main water line mysteriously ruptured, flooding the office building and destroying computers, guest records, and irreplaceable family photographs. The repair crew discovered clean cuts in the pipe, tool marks that told a story of deliberate sabotage. Standing in ankle-deep water, watching 80 years of memories dissolve into a muddy mess, I felt something break inside me that had nothing to do with water pipes. Sarah found me there at midnight, salvaging what I could from the debris. "They won't stop," she whispered, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "They will keep attacking until we are completely ruined." I looked at a waterlogged photograph of my grandfather teaching my father to fish. The image was barely discernible, but the memory remained crystal clear. "No," I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. "They just made their biggest mistake. They've shown me exactly what kind of people they really are." Sarah's hand found mine in the cold water. "Time to show them what kind of man I am." December 10th arrived like a media avalanche, burying Delilah's perfectly curated world under a mountain of truth. Channel 9's investigative unit broadcast HOA corruption exposed during prime time, with our story as the devastating centerpiece of a statewide crisis. The reporter had done her homework, interviewing financial experts who described our case as textbook racketeering and legal scholars who called it the most flagrant HOA fraud they had ever documented. When they knocked on Delilah's door for a comment, she hid behind her curtains like a vampire avoiding the sun. Morton's no comment lasted precisely 3 seconds before he slammed the door with such force that it rattled windows 2 houses away. The story went viral overnight. HOA corruption started trending nationally, and our small mountain dispute became a symbol of neighborhood tyranny everywhere. But the media attention brought something I had never anticipated. Resources for Justice, the district attorney, announced a criminal investigation the following morning, citing overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud. The state attorney general launched a parallel civil investigation into the practices of management companies across North Carolina. Even the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit requested copies of our documentation. My local struggle had inadvertently escalated into a statewide corruption case, bringing with it legal firepower I could never have afforded on my own. Delilah's reaction was pure panic masquerading as procedure. An emergency board meeting was called to cancel the December 15th budget meeting, citing security concerns due to the media circus. But Jenny had foreseen this maneuver, filing a court injunction before Delilah had even finished typing the notice. Annual budget meetings are legally mandated, the judge ruled succinctly. The defendant will proceed as scheduled, with appropriate sheriff security if needed. Witnessing Delilah's expression when the bailiff served her with that ruling was worth every sleepless night I had endured. Morton's desperation escalated to criminal foolishness 2 days later. Our security cameras captured him loading boxes of financial records into a commercial shredding truck behind the management company's office. As it happened, Rita's photographer was staking out the building. Sometimes, luck and preparation converged to create their own miracles. Sheriff's deputies intercepted the truck before it reached the shredding facility, recovering evidence that included handwritten notes about eliminating paper trails and a Phoenix backup plan. Morton earned himself obstruction of justice charges in addition to everything else. The community mobilization was like watching democracy in action. 400 people intended to attend our budget meeting in a venue designed for 200. Media outlets from 3 states confirmed their attendance. The governor's office sent an observer due to the statewide implications. I arranged for a shuttle service from the town parking lot just to manage the crowd. Even residents of Thornfield Estates were turning against their leadership. The anonymous recordings our allies provided depicted a board in complete disarray, discussing bankruptcy, declarations and transferring assets to offshore accounts. One recording sent a chill down my spine. Delilah strategizing about escaping to Morton's vacation home in Costa Rica if things go south at the meeting. I immediately shared that intelligence with law enforcement. Flight risk was now a genuine concern. The personal attacks reached a fever pitch in the final week. Someone hired a private investigator to unearth dirt on my military service, contacting old Army comrades in search of negative anecdotes. Sarah's workplace received harassing phone calls. Anonymous reports to Child Protective Services claimed I was an unfit parent due to financial instability. When they filed a false child welfare report against my family, something primitive and dangerous was awakened within me. You can attack my business, my reputation, and even my property, but when you threaten my children's well-being with baseless accusations, you have entered a territory where the rules of civilized conduct no longer apply. The CPS investigator closed the case within 24 hours, noting it was clearly malicious and without merit. But the harm was done. My sons had to face questions at school about whether their father was truly a criminal. That night, Jake asked me quietly, "Dad, are we going to lose everything?" I sat on his bed, looking at this boy who had grown up believing adults were generally fair and reasonable, and watched that innocence crumble before my eyes. "No, son, but we are going to learn something important about fighting for what's right, even when it's difficult." Luke chimed in from the top bunk. "Are you going to beat them?" I thought of my grandfather's stories of battling claim jumpers who tried to steal his land through legal maneuvers and intimidation. He had prevailed by being tougher and smarter than the bullies, not by being kinder. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm going to beat them." December 14th brought the final attempt at intimidation. Motorcycles circled our property from midnight until 3:00 a.m., revving their engines and leaving tire marks on our access road. Anonymous death threats filled our voicemail. Someone spray-painted "sell or else" on our main sign. The sheriff's station assigned a permanent patrol car to our property. But I was no longer afraid. I had faced real danger before. In places where people returned fire, a group of suburban wannabe toughs on motorcycles didn't even register on my threat assessment scale. Besides, their desperation was palpable. People who are winning don't stoop to death threats and midnight motorcycle parades. They were terrified of the next day's meeting, and their fear was making them reckless. I spent that final evening with my family at the resort, ignoring the ringing phone and watching the sunset paint the lake with colors that were the same as when my grandfather first laid eyes on this place. The moonlight on the water was timeless, but everything else was about to change. December 15th dawned crisp and cold. Ideal weather for a day of reckoning. I got to the community center at sunrise to prepare the presentation equipment, and the parking lot was already half filled. People had come from 3 counties to see this confrontation. Media trucks were positioned along the street like it was an election night broadcast. As I checked the microphone and loaded my evidence slides, a sense of calm that precedes decisive action settled over me. My grandfather's well-worn work gloves were in my jacket pocket for good luck. Hands that had constructed something enduring through honest work. The battle was finished. It was time to claim the victory. 2 o'clock arrived like a final judgment. The community center was packed far beyond the fire marshal's recommendations, with people standing 3 deep along the walls and spilling out into the corridor. 3 television crews had set up in the front corner, their cameras pointed like cannons at the board table where Delilah sat as stiffly as a marble statue. Morton was fidgeting beside her, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the December air. I walked down the center aisle, holding my laptop and the now famous manila folder, feeling the weight of 400 pairs of eyes on me. The silence was so profound you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Delilah attempted to seize control before the meeting even began, her voice sharp with feigned authority. Due to capacity issues and safety considerations, we will be limiting public comments to 5 minutes in total. Jenny's objection sliced through the air like a razor. State law mandates a reasonable opportunity for public input on budgetary matters. You cannot curtail legitimate participation. Sheriff Deputy Bradley, positioned conspicuously near the podium, nodded in agreement. It's a legal requirement, ma'am, a full hearing or no meeting at all. Delilah's first loss, and we hadn't even started. I connected my laptop to the projection system with the calm precision of someone who had practiced this moment 100 times. The first slide appeared on the wall behind me. Pinehaven HOA Financial Analysis 2019 to 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, I started, my voice reaching every corner of the crowded room. I am here to discuss our association's finances. What you are about to witness will be shocking. Second slide. Total collected from all property owners. $2, $1 million. Total spent. $2, $3 million. Audible gasps spread through the audience. Morton's face had transitioned from red to a pale green. Third slide. Reserve fund legal requirement. $800,000. Actual balance. $23,000. A woman in the third row shouted, "Where did the money go?" Others joined in until Deputy Bradley raised his hand for silence. Fourth slide. Management company overcharges. $400,000 over 4 years. The room erupted. People were on their feet, pointing at the board table, their voices escalating in anger. But I was not finished. Now, let's discuss where your money truly went. The evidence of personal enrichment landed like a bombshell. Delilah's $75,000 landscaping, Morton's $35,000 snow removal equipment, and the board members' luxury resort. Conferences in Hawaii and the Bahamas, but the definitive proof was the audio recording. I have one final piece of evidence, I declared, my voice cutting through the noise of the crowd like a church bell. This recording was made at a private board meeting last month. Morton's voice filled the room through the sound system. Once we own that resort, we're sitting on a $2 million gold mine. These hillbillies don't understand property values. It's almost charity work. Really? The silence was deafening. Then, Delilah's voice, dripping with contempt. The Pinehaven acquisition is just the beginning. We'll force out every pre-existing property and rebuild this entire area properly. Mountain living for people who actually deserve it. The explosion of outrage shook the building. People were on their feet shouting, pointing fingers. A retired teacher named Mrs. Henderson yelled, "You called us hillbillies?" Someone else shouted, "Thieves!" Morton made a dash for the exit like a rabbit spotting a hawk, but Deputy Bradley's partner was stationed at the door. No escape today? Delilah tried desperately to regain control. These are accounting errors, misunderstandings. Ma'am, I interrupted, projecting bank records onto the wall. These are your signatures on fraudulent expense reports, your nephew's management company, your personal benefits paid with community funds. The room laughed. Actually laughed at her transparent lies. The sound was brutal, dismissive. Final. The votes were cast as swiftly as summer lightning. A motion to remove the entire board passed 43 in favor to 4 opposed, with the board members themselves abstaining out of either shame or legal counsel. A motion to terminate the management company passed 45 to 2. A motion to hire an independent auditor was unanimous. A motion to pursue criminal charges passed 44 in favor with 3 abstentions. A motion to elect Rex Hartwell as interim board president was met with an acclamation so loud it rattled the windows. That's when the handcuffs appeared. Sheriff's deputies approached the board table with arrest warrants as Deputy Bradley read the charges. Delilah Thornfield, Morton Thornfield, you are under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. Delilah's impeccable composure finally shattered as the metal bracelets clicked around her wrists. This is a mistake. I'm an attorney. I know my rights. Yes, ma'am. Deputy Bradley replied calmly. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters surrounded me as the board members were led away, cameras flashing like lightning. How does it feel to expose this corruption? The Channel 9 reporter asked. This was never about revenge. I answered, keeping my voice steady and composed. This was about accountability, about protecting our community from predators who believed they could steal without consequence. As Delilah was led past in handcuffs, she avoided eye contact. The woman who had terrorized our family for months now seemed small, defeated, and ordinary. Just another criminal brought down by her own greed. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as the meeting officially concluded. People surrounded me, offering congratulations, shaking my hand, and patting me on the back. Sarah appeared by my side, tears of relief, vindication, and pride streaming down her face. A local restaurant owner announced a free dinner for everyone who had attended. Children asked for my autograph as if I were some kind of hero, though I felt more like a man who had simply done what was necessary. As the community center emptied and the media packed up their equipment, I stood alone for a moment in the space where justice had finally been delivered. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows felt warm on my face, like a nod of approval from somewhere beyond. My grandfather would have been proud, not just of the victory, but of how we had achieved it. With truth, preparation, and the courage to take a stand when it mattered most, the aftermath played out like a row of dominoes falling in slow motion, with each piece of justice clicking into place with satisfying finality. The criminal proceedings advanced more quickly than anyone had anticipated. Confronted with irrefutable evidence and zero public support, Delilah pleaded guilty to evade federal racketeering charges. Receiving 3 years in state prison and full restitution, Morton turned on his co-conspirators to protect himself, which earned him 18 months and a permanent exclusion from any HOA leadership role. The owner of the management company was indicted in a federal corruption case that spanned 4 states. It turned out our small mountain conflict was part of a much larger criminal network, but the true triumph was the financial recovery, which surpassed our most optimistic expectations. Court-ordered restitution amounted to $1.2 million, a sum that flowed back to the property owners who had been systematically defrauded for years. Each family received an average refund of $18,000. Sarah wept when the check arrived, not from sorrow, but from the immense relief of seeing financial stability restored to our lives. Our legal expenses were covered by the recovered funds. The insurance payout for the arson finally came through, enabling us to rebuild the maintenance shed to be better than it was before. For the first time in decades, Pine Haven Cabin Resort was entirely debt-free. The community's transformation was like watching a neighborhood recover from a prolonged sickness. We elected a new HOA board with representatives from across the entire community, not just Thornfield Estates. Monthly dues were reduced from $400 to $250 after we hired a reputable local management company for 40% of the previous cost. I voluntarily resigned as board president once the new systems were in place. I am a resort owner, not a politician, and I had achieved my goal: to clean house and restore accountability. The personal healing process was slower but more profound than the financial recovery. Sarah's stress-related health issues vanished almost immediately once the harassment ceased. Our twin sons wrote an award-winning school essay on standing up to bullies, which was published in the regional newspaper. We took our first genuine vacation in 2 years. A week at the beach where no one attempted to sue us, set fire to our property, or challenge our right to be there. My marriage emerged stronger than ever. Nothing puts a relationship to the test like a sustained crisis, and Sarah and I had passed that test with flying colors. But the repercussions extended far beyond our small mountain community. My phone began to ring with calls from HOA victims in 12 different states, people dealing with similar harassment campaigns, property seizure plots, and financial fraud. I started offering pro bono consultations, sharing the strategies and legal insights that had saved our resort, the state. Legislature invited me to testify on HOA reform legislation. The Pinehaven Act now mandates annual financial audits, full transparency in all HOA operations, and criminal sanctions for board member self-dealing. 15 other states have since introduced comparable laws. I never intended to become a whistleblower, but sometimes ordinary individuals must take extraordinary measures to safeguard what is important. Pinehaven Resort underwent a revival that took everyone, including me, by surprise. Bookings surged by 40% due to positive media coverage. The resort that fought City Hall became our unofficial marketing tagline, drawing in guests who wished to support the underdog who had triumphed over the system. We added new amenities, funded by the insurance settlement and recovered finances. The county designated my grandfather's original lodge as a historical landmark, guaranteeing it can never be torn down for condos. There is now an 18-month waiting list for summer reservations. But the initiative I am most proud of stemmed from using a portion of our restitution funds to create the Pinehaven Community Fund. We offer college scholarships to local students, provide small business loans to entrepreneurs, and finance an annual Accountability Day festival that celebrates government transparency. We also collaborated with a regional environmental organization to establish a permanent conservation easement to protect the lake's ecosystem. Regardless of who owns this property in the future, it can never be overdeveloped. The technical knowledge I acquired while fighting this corruption could fill a book. Every HOA member in America should insist on independent financial audits every 2 years, not just board-controlled reviews. Monthly statements should clearly show actual versus required reserve balances. When selecting management companies, obtain 3 competitive bids and thoroughly check references. Steer clear of any family ties to board members. Most importantly, set term limits for board members to prevent the kind of entrenchment that fosters corruption. Our story became a case study taught in real estate law classes and was featured in a documentary titled, When Neighborhoods Turn Toxic. The national HOA reform movement points to our victory as proof that organized communities can overcome organized crime. 6 months after the budget meeting, I got a letter from a farming family in Oregon who were facing identical tactics. They're trying to foreclose on our property using the same playbook. Sarah found me reading it at the kitchen table. Road trip? She asked with a smile that indicated she already knew my response, because here is what I learned from this entire ordeal. Bullies only succeed when good people remain silent. They rely on your fear, your isolation, and your belief that you cannot stand up to people with money and power. But they are mistaken. When ordinary citizens organize, document everything, and refuse to yield, justice usually prevails. It isn't easy, it isn't fast, and it certainly isn't pleasant, but it is effective. So, if you are confronting HOA corruption, remember this. You are not alone, you are not powerless, and you do not have to accept it. Document everything, form alliances, attend meetings, vote in elections, and when they threaten you, don't be afraid. Get organized. Post your own HOA horror stories in the comments section. Let's see just how far this epidemic has reached, and more importantly, let's assist one another in fighting back. Press the subscribe button for more David versus Goliath justice stories, because there are many more battles to be fought and many more bullies who need to learn that their time is over. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know. I want to see our community of accountability extend across the map. Remember, they rely on your silence. Do not grant them that power. Thank you for being here with us at End for HOA. If you enjoyed today's confrontation and seeing an HOA Karen put in her place, click like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to catch next week's drama. You won't want to miss it.